Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, and live the life we love. Don't forget, you got to labor, then you got to loaf, and then loofah to keep yourself nice and clean. All right. Journaling question for the day. That's going to be my new thing to start off. Is in what ways was your childhood unusual, or in what ways was your childhood ordinary? Take about 15 minutes, write the scathing truth, and if you want to discuss that with me, I'm always open to sharing things like that. Story for today is the three men in the woods. Once there was a man whose wife died, and he met up with a woman whose husband had died. They both had their own daughters. The daughters were acquainted with each other, and one day the woman said to the girl, to one of the girls, I'd like to marry your father. What do you think? And so she went back to the father and asked him, and he wasn't sure about that. He says, well, marriage is a joy, but it's also a torment. But he says, listen, take this boot that has a hole in it, hang it up in the loft on a big nail, pour some water in it, and if the water holds, instead of pouring out of the hole, I'll marry it. But of course, that's what she did, and strangely enough, the water didn't pour out of the hole, so he married her. Well, the next morning, got up, seemed like everything was okay. They celebrated the wedding, and he was a traveling salesman, so off he went. And of course, as soon as he went off, then the real colors of the woman and her daughter came out, because one daughter, she was beautiful and charming and sweet, and the other daughter was ugly and repulsive and nasty. So that's what happened. Anyway, the new mother really had it out for this, her stepdaughter. So she gave her all the rotten tasks to do, very much like Cinderella. And then one day her hate got so much that she made her a paper frock and said, I want you to go out in the freezing cold and get some strawberries. And the girl said, but this is all I have to shield myself from the elements. He said, don't go back talking, now get out there. And she gave her a piece of hard bread. She said, that'll last you for the day. And so off she went, obedient, didn't know what she was doing. There wasn't anything green she could see anywhere, and she was freezing cold. And so she went by a short time or a long time, whatever time it takes in these stories, and she ended up finding this little cottage in the woods, and she saw these three old little men peeping out. And so she knocked on the door and she said, can I come in? And he said, sure, come. She went to the fire to warm herself. She took out a piece of bread, and they looked at her and said, can we have some of your bread? And so she said, well, willingly. And she shared the bread with them. And then they looked at each other like, oh, she's so sweet. And then she said, would you mind sweeping our back porch for us? So she took the broom and she started to sweeping out the snow. And lo and behold, when she swept out the snow, there were all these beautiful fresh strawberries. Oh, she was taken with that. And while she was doing that, the three old men were saying to her, she's so pretty and so nice. What should we give her for being so kind and sharing our bread and being willing to sweep out the back porch for us? I said, well, I'm going to make her so she's more beautiful every single day. And the second one said, I'm going to make it so every time she opens her mouth, a gold coin comes out of her mouth. And the third one says, I'm going to make it so she's going to marry a king and live in royal means for the rest of her life. So that's what happened. And then they gave her the strawberries. She said goodbye to them. And by the time she got back home, when her stepmother and the daughter asked her what happened, every time she spoke to share the story, a gold piece came out of her mouth. Well, the other daughter says, this is not going to happen to her and not to me. So she immediately had her mother pack her a really good lunch, gave her a big fur coat, sent her out into the woods, and out she went. She found her way to the house where the three men were. She barged right in, sat down at the fire without saying anything, started eating her lunch. And then they said, will you share some food with us? And she said, I don't have enough food for myself. I'm not going to share it with you. And they looked at each other like, Then she said, well, would you sweep our back porch for us? And she said, I'm not your servant. Sweep it yourself. Oh, they didn't like this answer. And so they said, well, what will we give her? We ain't going to bless her for her nastiness. First one says, I'm going to give her a curse. Every day she's going to get uglier. The second one said, every day she speaks through her mouth, a toad is going to come out. Ooh. And the third one says, I'm going to make sure she dies a miserable death. So that's how it went. She came back empty-handed. They were very upset about it. Anyway, the stepmother, again, in rage, she had this yarn that had to be dipped into the ice water so its colors wouldn't fade. So she sent her out to, like, with a pickaxe to cut a hole in the ice and dip the yarn. So the young daughter, obedient, she went out, she started to do that. And as she was doing this in the freezing cold, the king's carriage came by, and he noticed her. She was beautiful. And when she spoke, a gold coin came out of her mouth. And he said, I'm in love with you. Would you come back to me and be my bride? So she says, willingly. So off she went. And then they married. And then within a year, they had a kid. And is that the end of the story? No. So when the stepmother and the ugly daughter heard that finally she'd somehow escaped to be the king's wife, and had a child, they went to visit and pretended, oh, they wanted to see their long lost stepdaughter. And when the king was out, she had just delivered the child. They took her by hands and foot and they threw her off the parapet into the river around the castle. And then the ugly daughter got in the bed. And when the king came back, he said, are you okay? She muffled, and the mother interrupted and said, no, she's having the violent sweats postpartum, so she'll be okay in a day or so. So the king said, okay. And the next day when he got up and she started talking, he didn't see her. She had her back to him. Every time she spoke, a toad came out of her. I said, this is weird. That's not what I remember her. And the mother interrupted again and says, oh, no, it'll pass in another day. Now, in the meantime, that night, strangely enough in the kitchen, a duck, don't ask me how this happens, this is a fairy tale, a duck swims up the gutter and says to the scullion who's there, so what's going on in the castle? He says, well, the king doesn't know what's going on, and he doesn't know about the people who are staying here with him, because they do what they want. So she was very upset about hearing that. She reformed herself from a duck into the queen. She went up, she suckled the baby, came back down, changed into a duck, off she went down the gutter. Same thing happened 2 nights in a row. By the 3rd night, when she came out, she said to the scullion, you've seen what happens. Go tell the king to come here tonight, bring a sword, and wave it 3 times above my head. So that's what she did. That's what the king did. And of course, after waving the sword 3 times, she switched from a duck back into her queen form. Explained to the king exactly what happened. He says, okay, I know what to do. So he waited, he kept her hidden, waiting till the christening, which was that weekend. And then when the christening happened, he said, before we christen the baby, we always like to mete out justice for the community. So I have a question, anyone who can answer it. What would you do with someone who plays dirty with other people? Who drags another person out of bed and then throws them into the water to drown them? And before anybody could answer, the old stepmother said, I think that the wretch deserves to have a horrible death, like put him in a barrel studded with nails, cover the barrel, throw him down the hill into the ocean. King says, you have pronounced your own sentence. And that's what happened. They stuffed the stepmother and the evil daughter into the barrel filled with nails, covered it, rolled it down the hill, threw it into the river, and that was their end. Whoa. Crazy story, huh? You want to figure that one out? Can't help you there. You're going to have to do that yourself. Unless you want to talk to me about it, then we can hash it out together. All right. I try to bridge the generation gap. I did it when I was younger by apprenticing myself to older people. Now that I'm older, I try to bridge it by connecting to younger people. I'm all for the things that are new and what's modern, but everything modern is not great, and everything old is not to be allowed to die. I'm not an elder who's going to be thrown into the spiritual dumpster. I recognize the fact that we all suffer. We all buy the literalism of our own story. We all tell ourselves fictions. It may or may not be true. And part of going to therapy in any kind is healing your relationship with your imagination. And we'll never be able to find a balance between trying to fit everything in neatly and ordered in our life and allowing ourselves to experience the unforeseen, the unpredictable, and that which is wild and therefore out of control. So I remind myself, first of all, and everybody else, let them who have ears to hear. The untrained mind is vulnerable to circumstances. And meditation is for those people who are born without having it all together. That's me. Maybe you too. And although meditation doesn't make you necessarily feel good, it does make you aware of what you do feel. And that's like your inner weather report. Then you know how to deal with it. So simply note each mind moment as it occurs. Very simple. What could be better than a meditation like this? You could take it with you anywhere. All you have to do is pay attention, and you're meditating. So I hope you understand this mantra. It sounds selfish, but it's about putting yourself in a good place to offer your gifts to the world. So I do anything and everything I can to make myself feel good, because I recognize that the happier I am, the better things go. So I hope you find the basis for change in your life by what is your belief? Can you change your belief? How will that affect you? And affirm it, remembering that you got to maintain this attitude regardless of all evidence to the contrary at the beginning. And be like a lawyer in the courtroom. Use your argumentative method in the courtroom of your own mind. Muster all the evidence on behalf of yourself and your healing power, and render a verdict in favor of yourself. Peace be with you all.